So before we begin, I just want to mention that this video was intended to be a single video. However, the finished product would have been over 20 minutes long, and I didn't want to make a 20-minute long video, and also with the time cards that I've been dealt the last few weeks, I've only really had time to work on the first half of it. So we'll be going over the first 5 cars on the list, and the second part will be linked at the end when it is finished. Alright, on to the video. If you're a car person, I'm sure you've had many nights where you found yourself scrolling through online listings of cars you know damn well you can't afford, as if you were about to whip out your checkbook and drop a down payment on them, 0 questions asked. Then you see that it's 2:13 in the morning and you begin to realize just how f***ed you are because you work first shift and have to get up at 6. Shit. Any car enthusiast will have a long list of cars that they would like to own, and I'm sure many of the cars on those lists are a bit up there in price. But that's when we start to turn to the affordable, high-performance heroes that we've all come to know and love. But now we find ourselves with a bit of a new dilemma: appreciation. Suddenly, the fun, affordable sports cars we were once considering are now out of our reach, and the prices are only continuing to climb. This has been the case with a lot of enthusiast cars over the last few years. So in this video, I'll be going over 10 cars that we probably won't be able to afford in the next 10 years. Okay, let's get the obvious one out of the way first, because I know if I don't include it in the video, I'll get yelled at for not including it, and if I include it too far into the video, I'll get yelled at for being too obvious. The Mark IV Supra. The Supra is one of the biggest names in Japanese performance car history, and has obtained a status of what can only really be described as god tier among the car community. It's also known to be a part of the 4 horsemen of the 90s, the other 3 being the RX-7, NSX, and Skyline. It's known for putting down some seriously big power numbers with relatively basic modifications, as well as constantly mowing down supercars on the highway and half-mile. It's also made its presence known in various other types of motorsports, such as Super GT, Le Mans, and drifting. As a matter of fact, one of the most interesting variants of the Supra, at least in my opinion, is the Supra HVR, which is a hybrid GT car with a 480 horsepower V8, as well as 2 electric motors that produce 200 horsepower, with a combined output of anywhere between 680 and 700 horsepower. This car was able to complete 616 laps during the 24-hour race at Tokachi International Raceway in 2007, which is pretty impressive. The Supra is one of, if not the most prominent examples of rapid appreciation. I quite fondly remember a time when you could find yourself a nice manual turbo Supra for under 25 grand. And of course, I remember naive 14-year-old me scrolling through all these Supra listings and finding many within obtainable price brackets, and coming up with this whole plan how I was going to get a job at 16, save up a couple years, and finance a Supra as a graduation gift to myself. But by the time I had graduated, Supra prices had skyrocketed at an alarming rate to like an average asking price of $60,000. And that was back in 2015. Nowadays, it's not abnormal for them to go for $80,000 to $100,000. One just got sold on Bring a Trailer not too long ago for $121,000. For around that price, you could get yourself a moderately used Gallardo, Superleggera. And right now, the average asking price for a unmolested good turbo model seems to be around $65,000 to $80,000. So at this point, you can literally give your left nut and still not be able to afford a Supra. Just a disclaimer, donating your testicle is not actually a thing. Please do not try it, and if you do, I accept no responsibility of any medical turmoil that you may experience after you try to do so. And something that seems to be flying over everyone's heads in the United States and Canada is the fact that you can get a nice imported Supra for a pretty significantly lower price than you would be able to get Supra stateside from a dealership or private collection. So you'd have a nice Supra, the whole right-hand drive JDM clout, and less bankruptcy. Now, a lot of people think that this is insane, and that it's all due to the Fast and the Furious. Now, obviously the Fast and the Furious in games like Gran Turismo did attribute to it by giving the car a superhero-like status, but I just kind of find it hard to believe that a movie would be able to hike up a car's price that much that quickly. I think more so what just happened is the market really woke up and people started realizing what these cars were capable of, and collectors started realizing that not many of these made it to the United States and there really aren't that many left under 800 horsepower. So conclusively, this isn't the last car this is going to happen to. I'm sure there's quite a few cars on this list that are really going to be up there in price one day. But I really think the part that shocked everyone about this is that it just happened so fast. The prices of Supras shot up tens of thousands of dollars, what seemed like literally overnight. So with that being said, I do think it's going to be a few more years until we see another car shoot up in price that quickly. Apologies, that segment was probably a little bit longer than it needed to be, but hey, there's a lot to talk about. Next up is the E46 M3. The E46 is the third generation of the M3, and it's widely regarded as the best M3 of all time. And some purists out there like to refer to it as the last true M3. I don't really know much about that argument except for the fact that apparently BMW got a little offended by it a while ago. The E46 is packing the S54 motor, which put out 338 horsepower for the Euro models and 333 for the US, and it can achieve a de-restricted top speed of 170 miles an hour, although some forums have reported pushing their M3s to 175, even 180. The E46 made a deep mark in the car world, delivering a raw driving experience even with the SMG, which apparently is not as straightforward to drive as you'd think. This is all owed to its planted feel, sharp steering, responsive throttle, and damn near 50-50 weight distribution, as well as a huge aftermarket. Whether you want to turbo it, supercharge it, keep it NA, and do an individual throttle body setup, the possibilities are endless with the S54. With all that into account, E46 prices are starting to get up there. One just went for $51,000 on Bring a Trailer and another for $50,000. That's pretty much already the original MSRP. The average asking price seems to be somewhere between the $30,000 and $40,000 range. And if you want to look a bit harder and dig a bit deeper into your pockets, you can find E46s pampered with dining upgrades as well as the ZCP model. Unfortunately, we never got the CSL in the colonies because us, right? With the rich performance pedigree and motorsports history this car maintains, I can only see the value going up even higher. Next up, we have another M car, the E39 M5. The E39 was sold from 1998 to 2003 and was one of BMW's flagship performance cars at the time. Like the E46 M3 that was sold around the same time, many enthusiasts consider the E39 to be the best M5 ever made. Although I think there's something to be said about the V10 E60. If you can get past the apparent detrimental reliability, that is. The E39 came with the 4.9-liter S62 V8 that put out 394 horsepower, and it was mated to a 6-speed manual and a 6-speed manual only. So if you want an E39, you're going to have to learn how to do a 3-pedal dance, no exceptions. The E39 was praised for many of the same things that the E46 was praised for, just on a bigger scale. Responsive steering, sharp throttle response, precise handling, even though it was a big sedan. And it was more intended to be a fast, powerful cruiser rather than a corner carver. It's said to provide a decently smooth ride as well as comfortable practicality, and is also said to have a de-restricted top speed of 186 miles an hour. This car was sold in somewhat of a sweet spot of performance cars, where everything was simple and subtle. You could have yourself a nice, fast car without really having to worry about a bunch of stupid little things breaking. This car simply gave you everything you need to have a high-performance daily, with none of the extra amenities like a modern M5 would have. Although, with the exhaust note this thing has, you probably won't be complaining. A 10,000-mile example was sold on Bring a Trailer for $51,000, and a Dynon S3 version, which comes with a supercharger among other Dynon bits, sold for $72,000. Average prices for the E39 also seem to sit between $30,000 and $40,000. So if you want one, grab it while you can, because like the E46, the prices are only headed north. Next up, we're going to be heading back over to Japan with the Acura Integra Type R. The DC2 Type R is widely regarded as being the pinnacle of Honda performance in the 90s, aside from the NSX, as well as one of the best handling front-wheel drive cars of all time, and generally just one of the best sports cars of the 90s. This car holds quite the legacy. It weighs around 2,600 pounds and is pulled along by the 1.8-liter B18C, producing 195 horsepower in the United States, which was pretty obscene for a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder back then. It also sports a red line of 8,300 RPM with a cutoff at 8,900 RPM. It came standard with a helical limited slip differential to provide optimal handling. One of the things that really makes the DC2 special is that for the longest time it was the only Honda to sport the Type R badge that we got in the United States. That is up until we recently got the FK8 Civic Type R. It was a sweet taste of what Japan had that we couldn't have back in the 90s. And this was one of the cars to have in the late 90s and early 2000s. However, this was by no means a common sight in the United States, as only 3,823 were produced for the United States market. And unfortunately, this number began to dwindle pretty quickly because a lot of them were stolen and stripped for parts at the time. With that issue, and a lot of them being crashed or just heavily modded to the point of their value diminishing, They have become increasingly rare, and it's become harder and harder to come by clean examples, thus skyrocketing the value. One recently sold a Bring-A-Trailer for $44,000, and I'm gonna guess that the bumper bra brought in an extra $2 or $3 grand. And a low mileage example was auctioned off for $63,000. The average asking price seems to linger between $25,000 and $35,000. So if you want one, you better hop on it, because the prices don't seem to be going down anytime soon. Next up is another Honda from the same era, the Em1 Civic Si. Introduced in 1999, the Em1 was the third Civic Si to hit the US market and the first to be completely unique to North America. The AT and EF, ED7 for you purists, share the same body style as their international counterparts. There was an EG Si quote-unquote sold in North America, but this was really only a trim upgrade on the EX and not a true Si. The Em1 was also the first Si coupe, as the rest were hatchbacks. The Em1 may not share the same pedigree as the DC2, but it was definitely an instant hit within the tuner community. Given its light weight of 2,519 pounds, which is actually lighter than the DC2, as well as its heart, the B16A2. While the Si Coupe was a first for the US domestic market, the B16A2 was not. The Del Sol VTEC used the B16A2 as well. However, the one in the SI saw some upgrades, such as a better intake manifold, bigger throttle body, stronger connecting rods, higher flowing exhausts, and a counterweighted crankshaft, among others. The SI was definitely a hot seller at the time, especially if you got one in Electron Blue Pearl. If you got one in Electron Blue Pearl, you were bound to gain a lot of attention at car meets. However, it also attracted some unwanted attention. The Em1 suffered from the same problem that the Integra did. A lot of them were stolen and stripped. Also, like the Integra, a lot of them have been crashed and just heavily modified over the past 20 years, making clean examples increasingly hard to come by. The highest bid on Bring-A-Trailer was $24,000, as well as another one for $22,000. The median seems to be around 10 to 15 grand for a clean one. While definitely not in the same league as the Integra Type R right now, the prices of these SIs have been steadily increasing over the years, and I imagine by the 2020s they'll be well into the $30,000 range. Alright, so that's all for this video for now. As I said in the beginning, I'm probably still working on part 2 as this is being posted, so I will try to have that out as soon as I possibly can. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I will see you when part 2 comes out.